Christmas is well and truly started for me. I got my Christmas jumper on. I've been out singing carols this morning. Got my Christmas tree at home. My kids have started on their Advent calendars and they're loving eating the chocolate every day. But is Advent more than just this chocolate calendar? I'm going to talk about that today. So when we think about Advent, we always think about the Advent calendar, and it starts on the 1st of December and it finishes on Christmas Day, and each day we get a picture or a chocolate or something like that. And this is for many people Advent, but actually as Christians, Advent is something bigger than that, and it's something that has evolved over time. And today I want to talk to you exactly what Advent is and what it means to us as Christians. Advent is such a special time as Christians because it's anticipating Christ's returning to earth and also that first coming. But it wasn't always that way. Advent started in the 4th or 5th century in Spain and Gaul's modern day France. And it was actually nothing related to Christmas or Christ's coming. It was related to baptism, and a baptism on something called a Feast of Epiphany. That's when it's traditionally related to the Magi visiting Jesus in Bethlehem, and also to his baptism and his first miracle in Cana. And this would be a period of preparation for 40 days, which the people who were going to get baptized would pray, they would fast, they would do their penance before they would get baptized on the Feast of Epiphany. It was only in the 6th century that the Roman Christians, because there were different groups of Christians around, that Advent started to be associated with the coming of Jesus. And this wasn't the first coming, this was the second coming, the return of Christ. Christ had died on the cross, he'd been resurrected, he'd been taken up to heaven, and then the Bible tells us he's going to return. And this is this Advent season, which is called Adventus in Latin, and that's taken from the Greek word parousia, meaning coming, that Christ was going to come back. And this is what they were looking at in the 6th century, that the Advent was all about the second coming of Christ. It was only in the Middle Ages that the first coming, the birth of Jesus with Mary and Joseph and the story in Bethlehem, is associated with Advent. So today Advent is celebrated over 4 Sundays before Christmas. The first 2 Sundays we concentrate and look on the second coming of Christ, and the last 2 Sundays we start looking at the first coming of Christ. And all the Bible readings that go through each day are kind of addressing those different things. They might be from the Old Testament or the New Testament, and they're talking about either one of those two things, either looking forward to his second coming or his first coming and telling the story about that. So Advent symbolizes this period that we are as a church between these two times. We're between the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ. And that's where we're sat as the church. Something that we call the last days. And we're waiting for Christ to come back in glory. And the church, we are called his bride. And we are waiting for that time in the traditional Jewish marriage that the groom would come at one point and collect the bride to take off and to be wed. And the bride would never know what time the groom would come, and the same as us as Christians, we don't know when Jesus is going to come back to collect us as his bride, and we're in that period. In this Advent period, at Christmas we kind of really look at that, but this is the general period that we are in. And this is actually really similar to how the Jewish people were in their period in exile in the Old Testament. And I want to read you this bit which I found, which I think really sums up this really beautifully. The church is in a similar situation to Israel at the end of the Old Testament, in exile, waiting and hoping in prayerful expectation for the coming of the Messiah. Israel looked back to God's past gracious actions on their behalf in leading them out of Egypt in the Exodus, and on this basis they called for God once again to act for them. In the same way, the church in Advent looks back upon Christ's coming in celebration, while at the same time looking forward in eager anticipation to the coming of Christ's kingdom when he returns for his people. In this light, the Advent hymn, O come, Emmanuel, perfectly represents the church cry out during the Advent season. And the words say this: O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appears. And then it says amazingly, rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. So while Israel would have sung this song in expectation of Christ's first coming, the church now sings this song in commemoration of that first coming and in expectation of the second coming in the future. So that's what Advent is. Advent develops from a kind of initiation, a baptism rite of penance and prayer and fasting into what we have today. An expectation of Christ coming in the future, but also recognizing Christ coming now. So even though we have Christmas trees and Christmas jumpers and chocolate Advent calendars, Advent is so much more, and it's a real period to get close to God and to really understand what the Bible is saying and did say about Jesus. It's a period of reflection and of prayer and coming to know God better through the story and the great hope of Jesus Christ. And so I ask you to, if you haven't already, get an Advent devotional. Us as a church, and I'll put a link to it, are doing a video devotional every day, and it's up on this site to encourage people in our church in their walk with their faith with Christ. So this is a real unique period as we come up to Christmas of really going deeper with our faith. And as we go deeper in our faith with Christ, what's really important is to share that with your friends and family, to say, look, this Advent is so much more than that. The birth of Christ is so much more than that. So in the coming weeks, I'll be talking more about, as we look forward, about Christ's birth and the amazing story about what's happening when we celebrate on Christmas Day.